Thanks to our Patreon members for helping to make this episode possible, and we're now available on all the major podcasting platforms. You can find more information at the links below. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a special edition here. And I had mentioned in a lecture about 2 months ago, maybe a little less than that I thought that there was this strip mining of culture that goes on in modern capitalism, and perhaps capitalism the entire time, that should be looked at. And I thought, but for two reasons, I counted two stories that made me think about doing this, and actually, having said I would do it, going, this is a good time. These two stories reminded me of this. And the first news story was of someone who was working at a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and two people hadn't showed up for their shift, and the manager didn't show up. And so they were the only person working, and all these people were in line. And they just said no, and they just walked out. But in the story, the detail that stuck out to me was they said they went in the back room, turned off the fryers, and then walked out and just left a line of customers. And they said, "Hey, do whatever you want. I'm not working here anymore. I quit." And so that was one. And then the other one was a story about these buy now, pay later programs that have proliferated quite rapidly around the world, and that they're doing very poorly indeed. And they keep increasing the amount of revenue they generate, but they also keep increasing their losses even faster. And this suggests quite strongly that while their business is growing, the delinquent or defaulting portion of their business grows faster, which suggests that it is not sustainable, nor profitable, nor a good idea in any way. And so I said, here it is, two examples, and let's talk about what it means to strip mine culture and why it's such a devastating threat to our society. Whatever society you're in, global society, I'll use U.S. as the primary example because that's what I'm most familiar with, but I'll give examples from other places as well. And it's what we don't tend to think about. And what happens is, just as if if you have a forest and the company comes in and, cuts down all the trees, which is terrible for the environment, they of course make a profit, but it destroys the forest for everybody else. If you have fishing, it's a classic overfishing thing where if fishing stocks are healthy, everybody can fish and then you have fish. But if, as tends to happen, major companies come in, they just overfish and they destroy all the fish. And so there's fish for no one, but the big company has taken all the profit and the money, and so they just move on to do something else. Now, that's how we tend to think about some of the problems with capitalism. Very little commented on, and I mean very little, is the notion that capitalism does exactly the same thing to values. It exploits all the values it sees that create a gap between maximum profit and people's behavior. And it's, in fact, like I said, I speculated based on basically no evidence. This would be sitting at the coffee shop staring at the middle distance, but it may be that all of the profit that capitalism generates is actually built on specifically this, is the exploitation of values. And at some point, just like a fishing or just like a forest or just like any other resource, if it's overutilized, then it collapses and it's not available for anyone. So what do I mean by this? Okay, so let's look at some famous bromide sayings, things that I'm sure all of us have heard. If you're from the United States, these are very standard ideas. Hard work is its own reward. If you want something done right, do it yourself. The early bird gets the worm. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. No pain, no gain. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. You get out what you put in. Honesty is the best policy. Your word is your bond. What's right isn't always popular, but what's popular isn't always right. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Do the right thing even when no one is watching. You can't cheat an honest man. And you look at that and you go, those all sound good, right? Those all standard. What happens when you put these in practice in a work environment? So for example, hard work is its own reward. So companies go, look, yeah, and we're told this, like hard work is its own reward. So why should we, so go ahead, just work extra hard, put in some extra hours. We're not going to pay you for them. Just really focus so that you'll get the most out of your job, not because we're paying you for what you're doing, but because hard work itself is a great thing. And so don't worry about the compensation. Don't worry about those things. At the same time, they're very, very clear that they want, if they have a resource, an asset of any kind, they're not saying, oh, it's its own reward. We don't need to sell it for maximum money. We'll just give it away because it feels good to give stuff away. No, they do not do this. And so one of the ways they trick people is they say, hey, because you're working hard, that's not only its own reward, but it has this sense of nobility, the sense of self-respect, the sense of feeling good about what you're doing, and that if you put a lot in, right, so that, what you put in is what you get out. And so this is the idea, if I really work and I really dedicate myself, then good things will come out of that. And my employer will see it, and I'll be able to, advance, and I'll move up the ladder. And of course, this is exploited catastrophically. I mean, all of the time. So, I mean, it's pretty standard in if you look at like startup world and all this, it's like, oh yeah, you're going to work 70 hours a week, but we're going to do this amazing thing, transform the world, and you might really get rich, right? Or you could just pay people for the wages and for the hours they work, which a lot of tech companies do, by the way. But a lot of tech companies, sort of try and exploit this notion. You have all the mission-driven programs where they say, oh, no, it's not about the pay. But then you look at like CEO compensation, corporate bond payments, corporate stock options, and you go, oh, no. For some people, it really does seem to be all about the pay. It's not about the work. Another one is like the no pain, no gain, of course. So this is like, being stress is good because this is a sign that you're going to gain. You're doing it well. And so if you look, I'll use Amazon as an example here because they're just so huge, so omnipresent, and so exemplary of all of this stuff. Right, like Amazon warehouse workers are constantly complaining about the conditions, but if you actually read some of the newspaper reporting about this, you often get people saying, oh, when I was young, I had to work in the heat too, and I had to work long hours, and these young people today, they just need to toughen up, right? They need to get some grit. They need to get some dedication. They need to get in that workout, get in there and just go. And then, of course, the hard work will be its own reward, and then they'll move up and they'll get something good. Where, of course, the Amazon warehouse is just famous for exploitative working environment, for burning people out and then, firing them, releasing them, closing the warehouses and moving them, doing whatever, right? They just don't care. They have absolutely no care. And their turnover is like 120% a year, which is like mind-boggling. They have to hire more people continuously because the jobs are so terrible. And so rather than saying, hey, this is just way too much work, like just say like this, we need air conditioning, we need breaks, we need water, and we need, a decent working environment. They're like, no, you just need to toughen up. When we were kids, we were tough, we worked hard. Also this notion of like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which is if you just, get some pain and get some dedication, and the next thing you'll know, something good will happen. Now, this is never written into a contract that says like, hey, if you show up to work every day, you work some extra hours in, a year, we're going to boost your salary by 20%. And in 3 years, we're going to boost your salary by 50%. Then all the hard work and struggle and pain would equate to, well, maybe that is sort of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Oh, no. See, it's always implied that if you do all this hard work and dedicate and really grind, then something good will happen. But no, this does not happen. Your word is your bond, and honesty is your best policy. And actually, sometimes this is legally codified, but certainly it's the cultural codification that is most important, which is like, if you say you're going to do something, you have to do it. But if we as a company say we're going to do something, if you don't have it in writing and you don't have a lawyer look over the contract, don't expect us to do anything, right? Like, just, if the number of people I've talked to, I'm sure you've all seen these stories and talked to people who have this, they're like, they fire the manager and they say, hey, could you take over for a bit while we get organized? And like, oh yeah, I'll take over managerial duties. And then like, but I'm going to want to be compensated like a manager. Oh yeah, absolutely, no problem. We're going to do this. We're going to, make that happen. And then a month goes by and 2 months go by and you're like, hey, I'm doing the manager's work, but I'm not getting paid like the manager I need. And they're like, oh, well, we're not going to fill that position. And you're like, oh, so you've just done 2 months of managerial, right? And so it's just this, and then you say, well, okay, this actually happened to me where I said, look, I'll keep doing, I'm not going to do the managerial work then, but I'll just go back and do clerk work. And they're like, oh, well, we really want you to do this. And I'm like, well, then you have to pay me like at the level that you said you were going to pay me at. Well, we can't, we really can't do that. And I'm like, well, then I really can't do that work. And so then I just ended up, it was sort of a quit firing, right? Like I said, I'm just not going to do it. And they said, if you don't do it, we're going to have to let you go. I was like, well, I'm not going to do it. So you can let me go. And so it was like, okay, we kind of agreed that I wasn't going to be around anymore, but it was a perfect example. For a couple of weeks, I was going along with it. And then I finally was like, look, this is just ridiculous. Like, hey, when are you going to actually pay me for the work I'm doing? And they're like, oh, well, but if I said I was going to do it, then I would expect myself, right? You have to honor your word. Your word is your bond. Honesty is the best policy. And I was like, oh, okay. Like this is, all of these things just add up to, boy, you're getting worked over and you get nothing back. My favorite is the early bird gets the worm, which is the notion that, if you come in early, same thing, come in early, get a jump on your shift, show up early, and et cetera, then great things will happen. Now, what's sad about this is there is a certain truth in all of these. Of course, there are truths in all of these, because otherwise they wouldn't stick around. They wouldn't resonate. Working hard in an environment that's healthy and rewarding on something you believe in does make you feel good, right? That's a yes. I mean, yeah, it is. It feels good. I think we could all agree to this. That boy, when you're really involved in something that you believe in, you're interested in, and you're dedicated to, that's great. And this is kind of its own reward. But when you're in an environment where somebody else is exploiting that and maybe not creating the greatest environment to be in, so it's not that great. You maybe don't believe that much in what you're doing. And anyway, the contract is I work for money. And so you've got to compensate me for this in theory. In practice, of course, no, this doesn't happen. And so it sort of, what happens is, both in a grand societal level and an individual level, it starts to erode our sense of ourselves and of these values. Like that honesty starts looking like a bad policy. Hard work starts looking like a sucker bet. Grit starts looking like suicide. All of these values, all of a sudden people start going, hey, wait a second. I don't know if I believe in it. Should my word be my bond, when a corporate word is absolutely not their bond? If you don't have it in writing, you don't have anything. And even then, they probably have better lawyers than you. Are you doing the right thing when no one's watching? So if no one's watching me, why should I do the right thing when you don't absolutely do the right thing when no one's watching you? And so for decades, corporations and companies, big and large, there you go, small, large, medium, all kinds of sizes, super global, have exploited these ideas. And what this allows them to do is to motivate workers with false promises that are never delivered on, the skepticism. But why is this a problem? We all know this. It all seems like, oh, sure. But here's the thing. And this is one of the things I was talking about, is when this becomes so endemic into corporate culture and into social culture generally, it really starts to make us think those values don't work. And I'll go back to the 2008 financial crisis, where I think, generally speaking, the sort of social contract, if you will, was still intact-ish. And people were like, oh yeah, if I work hard and I go to college and, I'll get a decent job, I can pay off my debt, I can get a house. All of this kind of dream was still there, and it was still implicit, and people still felt a bit like this might happen. But if we were in doubt before, the 2008 financial crisis just basically blew this up. And it eroded people's fundamental faith in the entire system. But what that meant in part, or in fact, I would say in some ways, in the most important way, is it undermined our belief in some of these core values that our society had been working on and that the corporations had been exploiting. And so just for example, what drove the 2008 financial crisis, amongst other things, but primarily was simply the fact that people almost never defaulted on mortgages. Therefore, mortgage-backed securities were great securities, but they almost never defaulted on them when you had standards. And then the entire value system collapsed around those loans. So when banks realized they could sell any mortgage that they generated for a juicy profit and not have it on their books, they started aggressively trying to generate mortgages. When loan agents realized that they could get juicy bonuses for generating loans that were passed to their corporate headquarters, which were passed off to investors, they started not caring about the quality of the applicant, to the point where, it is a historical fact, which doesn't sound like it could possibly be true, but they're giving short-term jumbo mortgages to people who had no paperwork and no income and no jobs, right? So the ninja loan, no income, no job. So what are the chances that someone with no income and no job is going to be able to pay off a $400,000 or $500,000 mortgage, particularly when it has a balloon payment due in, say, 3 years? Answer, 0, right? There's no chance. And so the mortgage idea that was based on a social value and social tradition of hard work, save up, put money down, invest in your house, believe in your house as something that you want to live in and protect and raise your children in, got converted into, hey, I can take out the massive loan for almost no money and with no paperwork and buy something that I hope to flip because I can get another massive loan and I can just keep doing this. And so as a person, even though I know this, I can't really afford these houses and I have no intention of living in them, I can make money. And as a loan agent, I obviously these people, I don't care, but I'm going to get a $5,000 bonus if I generate this, so I'm going to give them the loan. And the bank managers are like, we're just going to sell them off to the market, so we don't care. And they buy them, and they're like, oh, look, these are all good because mortgages almost never go bankrupt. And then all of a sudden, everything goes bankrupt because these things were completely unsustainable. And again, I mentioned this before, but what they then tried to do is they're like, oh, all these people were just like walking away from their mortgages, which is just called bankruptcy. This is perfectly reasonable and legal, but they kept coming on TV and saying, well, you've taken out a loan. You have a moral obligation to pay it back. No, you don't. It's you have a legal contract that if you can't pay it back, the bank gets the house. That's the deal. And so, but the banks were getting houses that were, worth a quarter or half of what they had or paper value for. And so they were eating huge losses on all this portfolio. And so they were doing an active campaign of trying to convince people to keep houses that were worth less than they're paying for them. And if you learn anything in business school, keeping something that's worth less than you're paying for it, this is a bad idea. They will tell you, do not do this. CEOs all over the world make this decision every day saying, hey, we're going to cut our losses, we're not going to do this anymore, and we're going to move on. But when it came to average people doing that, then all of a sudden, no, you've signed a contract, it's a moral obligation, it's better for you ethically and morally if you believe in this and if you do this, and it would be wrong for you to just walk away and stick the mortgage companies with this debt. Or as some people did, they just stripped the house. They literally stripped everything out of the house, sinks, tubs. They would just sell it, wires, light fixtures and everything, and then they'd walk away. Or they'd live in it for months and months and months without paying to save up so they could actually get a place that they could live in. So this was a catastrophe across the board. But one way it was a catastrophe is it just fundamentally violated the social contract on so many levels. And so people stopped believing, or belief was rattled and became much less common and much less powerful. And so fast forward to today, and here's what you see. You see this all the time, the kind of narrative and kind of stories that have grown out of this sort of attitude. And what this is people go, oh, this is a lack of values. This is destruction of values. People don't have the same, sense as they did before. And you're right. It's true. Because what they've learned is they live in a capitalist country. And some of them consciously, some of them unconsciously have realized, like, oh, if you live in a capitalist country, the best thing to do is act like a capitalist. But what happens when everybody acts like a capitalist? Ooh, this is when companies get really upset, by the way. So just some examples. If you look at any of the tech bro blogs or, blogs and YouTube videos and all this stuff, one of their biggest themes is that you're either an exploiter or you're exploiting, right? Like if you're not taking advantage of people, you're just a sucker. And that puts you in the sucker category with everybody else. And so what you're trying to do is look for some part of the economy that you can game, some part of the economy that you can take advantage of so that you make money off of the suckers. Just like a casino with bad odds. Like, okay, the market is, you're not doing anything. You're just trying to find something you can exploit for money. And that exploitation comes at the cost of the people who are suckered enough to do business with you. This is how they view it. It's not like a contract where you need steel and I'm building a building, so we're going to work out a long-term deal where we negotiate and it's good for both parties and we have a long investment in our relationship working, and no, that's just it. Like, it is mediated by technology. It's this gaming mentality. It's this notion that, if we can take a 5% margin on $1 billion, hey, look at us, we're getting rich. And so just find some place to stand and make that exploit. Without delivering, they don't care about if they deliver something, that's fine. But if they can deliver nothing, that's finer, right? But it's really important thing is this notion of the world is categorized. And you can see this consistently in the language they use as the suckers and the exploiters. And so, are you a sheep, or are you one who slaughters the sheep, or shears the sheep, or both? Right, here's your choice. You're shearing and slaughtering, or you're a sheep. And of course, no one wants to be a sheep. So you think the only logical thing to do then is to start exploiting the other sheep, as if there's no other possible social relation. This is a very capitalist outlook, right? Squeeze the profits out of the last possible everything that you see around you, and let's go. Another example of this, as we see, is right now Amazon and a lot of other companies are losing huge amounts of money on return gaming, where people are like, say, buying something, saying it doesn't work. And then often the company's like, oh, it's not worth having them ship it back. So we'll just give them a refund and say, you keep it. And so they get their money back, plus they get the product. Or they ship a different product back, or they ship something completely unrelated. So they buy a big screen TV, and they say, okay, we'll send you a return box. And so they put something else in there, like an old chalkboard, I don't know. And who else would have a chalkboard? I have a chalkboard. They don't have a chalkboard. But somebody put something else in the box and ships it back. Okay, so then that order has to get opened. It gets scanned. People look at it and go, is this the TV? It's not the TV. Okay, now we have to report that. So it creates all this problem. And they're like, is it worth bothering to pursue this fraud? And everybody goes, no, it's whatever. It's the cost of doing business. But that cost is exploding. And I found a survey that somebody did. Trust surveys about as far as you can throw them, but you kind of look for the data you can find. But with modest confidence, given the environment and what the numbers tell you, is about half of consumers who purchased things online said they had gamed returning system in some way, maybe a small way, maybe in a big way. And what this means is, they're just looking at this as a game to play. Like, oh, I can get free stuff from Amazon. Well, fine. And so Amazon has changed its rules to really punish suppliers so that they don't want to pay for it anymore. So punish the suppliers. So now the suppliers have to pay a bunch of the money. And okay, now we're in a problem. And so, Amazon passed the buck off to somebody else, but somebody has to pay for that stuff eventually. But when millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of consumers start looking at something not as I want shampoo. What's a good shampoo? When they look at it and go, oh, I want shampoo. How do I get it for free? How do I game this system? How do I open a blank account and use it until I get all the reward bonuses, right? And you just, it's amazing. An example of this would be my old job. We signed up for a system, and when you did that, you got some reward money. So it was like, oh, we'll give you a gift certificate to Amazon. I actually think it was literally Amazon. And then we're like, oh, okay, we don't care, but we need to use the thing anyway. But so everybody got this little bonus. But to get the bonus, it was virtually impossible. And I was like, why is it so hard to get them to send us what they said they would? And like, oh, it's clearly, I realized slowly, because I'm slow at this stuff, that it was all anti-scam. Right, to keep people from just opening up an account that they never pay for, that then they get Amazon dollars, which are delivered to some fake account that then runs with the money. And you're like, oh. And so this is so aggressive that it's becoming a big problem everywhere. The problem is, or part of the problem is, most of these points reward gaming systems are themselves exploitative of the consumer. And so when the consumer starts shopping around very consciously and very aggressively to say, oh, if you're going to do this, how do I game it? And then they're like, oh, we don't want people gaming our system. And you're like, well, don't produce systems that are designed to be exploitative of the consumer, because why then shouldn't the consumer be as maximally exploitative of your system as possible? Oh, and then they say, well, honesty is the best policy. It's like, well, is it the best policy for me? Or is it the best policy for you if I'm honest and you're dishonest? And it turns out that if I'm dishonest and you're honest, this can be great, can be super profitable. But if we're both dishonest, oh, this makes things really difficult. And we don't like it if we're companies. Now you have the buy now, pay later scams, which have just absolutely exploded, as I mentioned. So I read this article about it, and it turns out that Klarna is the largest one, but there's a lot of other big ones that does this. And they're just credit cards with unbelievably punitive fees and interest rates. Like, wow, are these things punitive? But what's magic about them is you don't have to qualify for credit. They don't do any credit checks. They're instantaneous. And as it says, it lets you buy now and pay later. So if something is $500, I can pay for it in 4 payments of $125 each. Just sign up for this ridiculous thing. And then, hey, presto, you're off and running. And part of this, of course, is collections, because what do you do when people don't pay? So all of these businesses, not all of them, most of them, Klarna certainly does, have collection arms that are different businesses functionally, but corporately they're in the same corporate family, because you don't want your lending business to be associated with the ugly side of it, which is trying to press people to pay for shit. And so they separate them so you don't have that brand damage or whatever they call it. As a result of really harassing people to get your money from them. But these things are exploding, but they're exploding in part because they're making a lot of bad loans that people aren't paying. So as I mentioned, their revenue keeps growing, but their debt just explodes because people don't pay it back. So for as long as they're in a massive growth phase, and as long as they're generating more revenue up front, then they're scaling up. The problem is the more customers they get, the more money they lose, but they're losing it at a time lag, right? So if I lose $1 million last month, but I make $10 million this month, that looks like I made a $9 million net profit. Next month, if I lose $10 million, but I scale to $100 million, it looks like I've made $90 million in profit, right? You see the problem. But one day, when the business doesn't scale, it turns out that the losses all of a sudden leap up and eat completely all of the revenue that you thought you were generating, and it all looks kind of ugly. Plus, they make much of their money as on paper coming from the fees, which are absurd, and the collection fees, which of course they charge consumers to collect the debt. So it's just another fee. And of course the interest rates are off the charts. But they're spending billions and billions of dollars doing this because it looks great. But of course consumers have figured this out, and they're like, oh, my credit cards are maxed out. I don't have any more credit. So what I'll do is so I got to payments, I can do these all systems. So I'm just going to run up, $50, $70, $500,000, whatever it is in debt, and then declare bankruptcy. And then these people are just out of luck. So bankruptcy, particularly those associated with credit cards, is growing very rapidly, as is debt delinquency. And part of this, of course, is due to inflation, and the economy is not doing well. Wages aren't keeping up with inflation. So all the problems that get talked about. But obviously, and this is something that is known within the industry, and you can find reports on this, is active gaming. Like there is a group of people who are just sitting down going, oh, look, I'm just going to create a fake online person who's going to borrow, $50, $75, $100, $150, $200,000 through all these pay now, buy later, whatever systems. So buy now, pay later systems. And there I am. Like I got $250,000 worth of stuff for free, and then I just shut down that fake identity. I get the stuff. They have no idea what's going on. And hey, presto, I win, and I never pay them back. And so it's corporations. Screw them. They have bad. It's their fault because they have bad security systems, and they're making bad loans. It's not my fault they made me a bad loan. It's their fault for making me a bad loan. That's a very, very capitalist idea. If you want to make me a bad loan, that's not my business. That's your business. And if you lose all your money making me a bad loan, that means you're bad at business, not that I'm a bad person. But they would say, oh, you should be honest. And it's like, well, are you being honest? It turns out, no, they're not being honest. It's a complete scam ripoff. It is like loan sharking that looks legal. And this is really important in countries outside of the United States that actually have a lot of laws around debt. And so in France, is where I am, is a particularly great example of this because they have very strict laws about how much debt you can carry. They're trying to keep people out of debt. Well, these buy now, pay later scams have come along, and it turns out they somehow have so far, I'm sure this will be rectified, well, this is all going to burn down a veil of tears anyway, but either before but probably after, they're going to adjust because this is just credit cards but worse. But right now it's not captured in the system because it's more like a layaway program. Anyway, they found a legal loophole, which is what capitalism is all about. Find a space you can stand in and exploit the people until that space goes away. And so this is what's happening. But it's not profitable, it turns out, if a sufficient number of the people who are supposed to be getting screwed are in fact trying to screw you. And this is what they may be discovering. I think this is what they are discovering, is it's not just people who are in debt and stressed and need this, which is, of course, part of it. It's also people who just look at this and go, are you kidding me? They're just giving me free money. I can create a fake online account and take free money. This takes me like 1 minute. And hey, presto, you're going to give me $50,000 or $100,000 in unsecured credit? Well, one of us is dumb. One of us is a sheep who's about to get sheared or turned into mutton. And you just go along this and you go, oh, so right now about a third of student loans are in default or delinquency. And this is in the United States, and this is a total of about $352 billion. So this is record high. This is really ugly. So there's over $1 trillion in debt here, and $352 billion of it or more. I mean, depending on how you count this, the numbers vary a little bit. It's massive. It's 30-ish%, and it's hundreds of billions of dollars. I can do the numbers and make them even bigger, but we'll just go with the conservative side of this. Well, what's going on? How can that be? Well, it turns out that in the United States, one of the loans you can't go bankrupt on, basically the only one, is student loan debt. And so how can 30% of the people who have taken out student loans just not be paying them back? And this is happening all over the world, by the way, not just the United States, but here's a United States example, is about 40% of young people, which is, again, depending on how you score, 18 to 26 or 16 to 24, I mean, there's different ones, but say about 40%, are neither working nor seeking work, with about 15 to 20% of young people simply completely out of the workforce. And this is a number that's gone up and is growing pretty rapidly at the moment. I mean, this could turn around. These numbers have been higher a while ago, but you got to look back to find this being in worse condition. But what seems to be clear, and they call this lying flat in Japan, not in Japan, in China, it's called lying flat movement. And in Japan it has something similar. You see this NEET is neither education or employed or training or something like this is an acronym they have for these people who are just seemingly dropping out of the labor force completely. And so what happens is, or part of what's happening is, if you look at the system and you say it's rigged against me and I don't want to be an exploiter and I don't want to be exploited, what I'll do is I'll just not participate. So what happens if I don't pay my student loans back? Oh, they pile up and you ruin your credit rating. Like, okay, great. I functionally do not care about my credit rating. Okay, well, we're going to garnish your wages. Good luck. I'm not working. Okay, we're going to, yeah, we don't know what to do now. Right? Like, what do you do when someone, all the punishments, all the thing, like, you should be working hard to get ahead. Like, no, because if I go to work, you're going to garnish my wages and I have this huge debt and inflation eats it away anyway, and you're trying to screw me at work. So, no. So I'll just use buy now, pay later stuff, make a bunch of money on doing that, sell the stuff so I have cash, and then I'll move on. And so forget all you people. And what happens is, so the strip mining of the values erodes the entire social structure. Just the way you clear cut a forest, you've destroyed the entire ecosystem. When you strip mine people's values, you destroy all of the core necessary components for social cooperation, and it begins to break down. But it begins to break down at every level, just the way the loans in the great financial crisis broke down. It's like, oh, my incentive here is to just get money. I don't want to be a sheep, so I'm going to find some sheep to shear. And it turns out the sheep to shear might be a huge multi-billion-dollar corporation that for some reason wants to give me a stupid loan. Or I got an education, I can't get a job, I have this big debt, so, well, forget that. I'm just going to drop out of the program entirely. You can look, there's stories about, what countries can you move to where they don't, where the United States cannot track your wages, so that you can go and just pretend like it never happened and start over again someplace else. All of these kinds of things exist, and it creates unbelievable social costs. And what you're seeing with the soft economy, a strange economy, inflation, wages aren't keeping up again, stagnation, all these things, is increasing stress, less belief that the hard work that you're supposed to be doing will pay off. And so people begin to check out of the system, exploit the system, abandon values that might actually have some merit to them, and go, like this is really, really destructive of your social fabric. Because without some shared consensus of why we're doing things, we're doing them together and we should all contribute, it falls apart fast. That's what history says. It says when you start reaching these points, it's like, And so that's why I thought it was such a fascinating one, the story I started with about the person quitting from the KFC. And what stood out to me is, here's a famously exploitative job. They've taken all of the creativity and the ability of people to make a contribution out. So they've tried to make these they want robots to do them. So they're trying to make the people like robots. So it's completely manufactured. It's completely assembly line. So there's no reward for you working hard because it doesn't matter. You don't get any wage increases. They're famously badly paying jobs. You have no route to, advancement. You get no social credit. You get no respect, right? So it's a really unpleasant, unfortunate job. It doesn't have to be that way, by the way. You could make these great jobs, but that's not the way we're going to do it, or at least we've done it so far. So this person is at work. Nobody else shows up because why would they? The manager doesn't even show up because why would they? And they're supposed to be responsible for this place, and they just realized at some point, they're like, no. But what they did is they went back and they turned off the fryers. That was the detail that leapt out at me. They still vestigially in their mind someplace had this like, well, I am responsible. Like, I don't want to leave this place with hot oil going because that's dangerous. Somebody could get hurt, right? And so I thought, there it is. They're in this trap where they've been functionally abandoned. They're being exploited and taken advantage of. The whole system is falling apart. People can't buy the food they want. And yet still there is this vestigial human value still in this person who's going, okay, I'm going to leave. They didn't take all the money out of the register. Why not? I don't know. Because they're probably honest, right? I don't want to steal. I'm quitting. I'm not a thief, right? So that's one. I think if you go to MBA school, they'll tell you absolutely you should take that money out of the register. That's what an MBA stands for, I think, take the money out of the register. And then you go back and you make sure the place is safe, right? So again, it's like, there it is. Right. So all of the safety features that have been put into factories and construction jobs and all this were forced on these people, forced on the business owners by and large, by government interference and union interference, as they would call it, because they would do crazy stuff to their workers, like trying to give workers shade and water in the field. It's controversial. Like, why should I have to give my field workers shade and water? They should just fucking work, right? And then the farmers get angry when those kinds of safety features get forced upon them. They're not volunteering. Some of them are. Some of them are decent human beings, of course, but many of them are not. They're like, hey, these people are here to pick. They should just pick and stop standing around the shade drinking water when it's 110 degrees. And So we still have this strong vestigial sense, but at some point, even that will break away. At some point, people are just like, well, I'm going to light the place on fire as I leave. And that, but when you reach that point, now we're really in trouble. So this is just a quick reflection on, what the social fabric. People say, oh, it's unwinding, or it's, fabric is rending, and all these questions, which is true, but it's not that it's like wearing out. It's that it's being torn apart actively. It's being actively attacked. And when that starts to fray to a sufficient degree, particularly when the sheep start to rebel functionally, when the other people start to say, oh, okay, you're going to game me, I'm going to try and game you back. I might not be very good at it, but if you have 1 million or 10 million or 100 million people trying to game your system, some of them are going to be great at it. And those costs, you can look this up in any industry, are skyrocketing. And that is a marker, one, of economic stress, but two, the behavior pattern itself is more of a marker, not just of economic stress, but of active sort of resistance, of active striking back, of going, no, like I'm going to do everything I can to take advantage of this because I just have no investment in all of these old values that I've been getting exploited with for my working, creative, young, old, middle-aged life. Like, why should I keep doing this? What is the point? And again, I think this is where we are. The social fabric has gotten to this place where increasingly people just are not going along anymore. And this may seem slight and trivial or whatever, but it's not. It really is. Again, the example I want to try and reinforce here is it is the social fabric being actively destroyed from the outside, or I guess would be from the inside if you're in a capitalist system, from the corporate culture, which is emphasized so much, has grown to emphasize so much exploitation. And now that the response is that idea, that attitude, that selling system has become so ingrained that now people at every level are starting to use this. And wow, this is destructive. So, interestingly, I would say this is probably a necessary precursor to end on a happy note. It's like you can't change a system until it really, really starts to go off track. And I would say this is evidence that we're really going off track. So how far off track? I have no idea. But it certainly will probably lead to change. Again, with the example with student loans, once everybody realizes that people just aren't paying off their student loans, is it 30%? Is that enough to make the industry stop? Or 40% make the industry stop? At some point, it becomes such a complete loss of money. No one wants to pay $352 billion in losses. This is not a popular program. Then they will say, well, we aren't going to do student loans. If in the United States companies say we will no longer do student loans, the entire education system grinds to a halt. At that point, people will have to start doing something. Until that point, no, people aren't going to do anything. I mean, they'll make marginal changes around the edges. They'll complain. They'll worry about enrollment and costs and all this stuff, all this hand-wringing, blah, 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 blah. Nothing will happen. What will really change things, maybe something will happen. I should be more optimistic. But probably what will really bring a change about is when the big lending institutions say, you know what we're not going to do? We're not loaning to students anymore because we're having to write off $350 billion worth of losses. And so forget that. By the way, these loans are generally guaranteed by the government, so it's really the government would have to say we're no longer going to insure student loans, so you are going to have to eat $352 billion in losses, at which point they'll definitely stop loaning, at which point no one will be able to pay for higher education, at which point, holy cow, what do we do now? And I think we're kind of approaching those kinds of windows, those kinds of moments where people start going, wow, maybe we don't need to tinker with this. But we just have to have a system that's very different. And hopefully one can dream much less exploitative. So the next time you're pondering something that evil corporations are doing, by the way, I'm not just saying corporations are evil, universally. It's just the outlook that's the problem. It's they're implementing a functionally devastating worldview that creates all kinds of problems. And those problems are now, ramifying. So when you think about like all the examples, overfishing, environmental pollution, forest destruction, logging in the Amazon, all of these things, pollution that we all know and hear about and go, I wish big companies wouldn't do bad things like that. Probably the more devastating thing in the long term, maybe even in the short term, but certainly in the long term, is just the wholesale fraying of the social contract and social structures by destroying the values that allow societies to function. And that's a big one. We'll see if we make it. Probably won't make it all the way there, but it's as people have commented, many people have noticed that the whole system seems to be stressing just a little bit. So yeah, stay tuned and see what happens. So there's a new way perhaps for you, but certainly rarely expressed, that one of the major exploitations that it actually affects us a lot is this kind of destruction of core human values. Thank you very much.